What's up guys, my name is Ace, and with Black Ops 6 right around the corner, it seems the general hype and anticipation is growing, and it's fairly high this year compared to some recent years of Call of Duty. And while I'm personally really excited for this one since I really like Treyarch games, and this time they've actually had quite a long development cycle for this, today I did want to share the handful of concerns that I have for this game going forward. Now just to be clear, I have played this game a few months back, so I do already know a lot of things about the game that I can't talk about publicly due to my NDA. However, with this list of concerns I have, I'm going to be focusing on things that I don't have any inside information on, or things that were just not set in stone by any means back when I played the game, since there's still room for a lot of things to change, like with weapon balance for instance. The weapon balance I played with is likely not going to be the same weapon balance that we're going to experience in the beta of the game. So I just want to make sure I'm clear about that before we get into this list. And without further ado, let's dive into it. And honestly, one of the biggest concerns that I have is with the Omnimovement system, and not so much my perception of the Omnimovement system or my enjoyment with the system. I'm actually really looking forward to diving in more and experimenting a bunch with the movement and maybe figuring out some new things that you can do with it. My concern with Omnimovement is more so the community reception to Omnimovement. This is quite a big change to the core mechanics of Call of Duty. It's something we've never really experienced before. And anytime there are big changes or innovations when it comes to something so integral to the game, like the movement system, there's always going to be a risk that it will turn at least portions of the player base away from the game. So obviously my hope is this will actually bring back or attract more people than it will potentially push away. And at the end of the day, I hope the final balance of Omnimovement is such that even for the people that aren't a big fan of it, it's not enough to push them away from the game. But this is something we really won't know for sure until we get it in the hands of the community. I think in the beta, we'll start to get a solid indication of this, since everybody will have an opportunity to try it out and see if they like it or not. And while I do think at least the majority of the player base will be accepting of the Omnimovement, or maybe even really enjoy Omnimovement, I am curious to see and a little bit concerned that certain portions of the community will be pushed away because of this change to the movement system. Now, if you are somebody that's on the fence about it, I hope you're at least willing to give it a shot. You've really got nothing to lose. There will be an open, free portion of the beta, so give it a shot at the very least. But at the end of the day, if it's something that you really hate, I would totally understand. It is a pretty big change to how the movement works in a Call of Duty game, and I don't think it's going to be for absolutely everybody in the community. So that's my first big concern with Black Ops 6. The second one I've got here is connection quality. This is an area where I just feel like Call of Duty's been using the same servers and the same system for quite some time now, and it's frustrating that it seems year after year we never really see any improvements to this. Now, I'm not going to act like Call of Duty has the worst connection experience out of an FPS game that I've played, but at the same time, like I said, it seems like nothing has changed over the years, and you would think that there would be continual improvements to this area, and yet I haven't really noticed any over the years. And as it is right now, I'm just finding way too much inconsistency with the connection experience, and oftentimes, even when I have a good ping in a lobby, the packet loss or packet burst can be crazy, and I also feel like I'm one of the luckier ones where that doesn't happen too often, and other people have it significantly worse, where they're constantly dealing with those issues. So at least from a player's perspective, it really seems like it's time for a significant upgrade when it comes to the general connection experience, whether that's their server infrastructure or how they handle the netcode. I don't really know. I can only speak from a player's perspective here. But my concern with Black Ops 6 is since it is just going to be added to the COD HQ, I'm really not anticipating any major changes to their server infrastructure or how they handle the netcode in the game. And if I had to guess, we're going to be playing on the same servers and the same general netcode that we've been playing on for years now. So the next thing I've got on my list here, this is the spawn system. And normally, I wouldn't have any concerns going into a Treyarch Call of Duty game. I find Treyarch, out of all of the developers, they tend to handle 6v6 spawns better than any of them. In saying that though, this is Treyarch's first time around with the new branch of the engine, and my understanding of this based on leaks in the past, so it may not be accurate, but as far as I'm aware, this new branch of the engine has entirely different spawn variables, and therefore the spawn system at its core with this newer branch of the engine is just inherently different than it used to be. And in my experience with games on this engine, it's generally worse than what we're typically used to with Treyarch at least. So this is an area where time will tell on this. Perhaps I'm totally misinformed on this, and they're just using the same old spawn system they've been using in the past for Treyarch games, which I think would be just fine. Or maybe those leaks and rumors are correct, but Treyarch is best equipped to rework that spawn system to get it into a much better place than it has been in for recent Infinity Ward Call of Duty games at least. So of course time will tell on this, but I would be lying if I said this wasn't a concern of mine, since the spawn system is so incredibly important when it comes to the general pacing and flow of the game. Next, on a somewhat similar vein, with Black Ops 6 being added to the COD HQ, which is the exact same launcher that the past 2 games have been on, one of my concerns is that the user interface will be too similar to the current one, because the current one that we're working with is just awful in general, and this is one area where it seems the community is almost unanimously in agreement. The user interface in general sucks to navigate. And based on what we have seen from the reveal, there were several images that were shown off of the game itself. It does appear that at least many elements of the UI are going to be essentially identical to what we're currently working with. Although, of course, that's the type of thing that can change quite a bit, especially later on in development. Things like that can often be shifted. But I do want to point out at least something promising that I saw. I know this isn't much, but it's at least something. And I did cover this in the past when I went through all the little details I was able to pull out, going frame by frame throughout the reveal. With this image right here, if we zoom in-game, when somebody is swapping their loadout, we can see the loadouts are oriented in a vertical menu. And that's at least somewhat promising to see. That's a significantly better way to lay out your loadouts compared to the 2-tiered horizontal scrolling that we currently have in Modern Warfare 3 and Modern Warfare 2 we had that. So I'm hoping this is at least an indication that Treyarch is making some adjustments to the UI to make it a little bit more user-friendly, a little easier to navigate, and a bit easier on the eyes as well. Now, admittedly, user interface isn't nearly as important as many of my other concerns because it doesn't directly impact the gameplay, but it is still something that I feel deserved a spot on this list. Next, let's get into some really specific gameplay concerns that I've got here. One of them is the meat shield mechanic that they're adding, where from the reveal we can see that you can take an enemy player hostage mid-game and use them as a meat shield. As funny and kind of interesting as that sounds, from the victim's perspective, I worry that this is going to be way too frustrating, especially if they're able to do this for a long period of time and you're just stuck there waiting for something to happen. You may as well just set your controller down at that point because you're no longer able to play the game because the enemy player has you locked into this animation. And generally speaking, especially in a fast-paced game like Call of Duty where it's just like action, action, action all the time, I'm really not a fan of being locked into situations where you have no control, you have no agency, you can't do anything. And finishing moves can sometimes be frustrating enough, but that's just a few seconds, so that's at least tolerable. What about this meat shield mechanic? I suspect it's going to be longer than a few seconds at least, and therefore that is absolutely a concern on my list here. But of course, again, time will tell on this. We'll have to wait and see how they end up balancing this out. Now, moving on to another concern that I have expressed in the past. This is weapon balance, but honestly, more specifically, sniper rifle weapon balance. And the reason I have this specific concern is looking back to Black Ops Cold War. The sniper balance, in my opinion, wasn't in a great state in that game. And I did do a very basic time to kill analysis of this game, and it seems like for the regular guns, we're going to be seeing a time to kill roughly equal to what we saw in Cold War. And if that's the case, with that level of time to kill, it can make it very tricky to get that perfect balance for one-shot kill weapons, especially sniper rifles that can one-shot kill at any range. And that's not the only reason I'm concerned about sniper balance. Another reason is from an interview with the developers. They mentioned that at least at the time of that interview, all of their sniper rifles were a one-shot kill to the torso and up. And if that holds true going into the launch of the game or the beta even of the game, I am absolutely concerned that snipers are going to be overtuned and really frustrating to try to play against if there's not a bunch of viable counterplay. And that's the thing, I don't want sniper rifles to be totally useless as well, but it is a very fine line between overpowered and useless when you're dealing with a Cold War style time to kill value for your regular full auto guns. But then moving on to my next concern, this is post-launch content support, especially when it comes to 6v6 maps. And a big reason I have this concern is looking back to Cold War. They did not have the greatest track record for 6v6 support in Cold War, and actually threw a graphic together looking at all of the seasons 1 through 6 for Black Ops Cold War, and I highlighted all of the brand new 6v6 maps in green, the remastered 6v6 maps in orange, and then there's the one reskin map, that Nuketown Holiday version, and that one's different because Nuketown was already in the game, so this is just a reskin of an existing map in the game. But across all of these seasons, we only got 8 brand new maps and 7 remastered maps. Excluding that reskin, that's an average of 2.5 maps per season, which definitely doesn't feel great, especially with the newer style of Call of Duty being treated much more like a game as a service. That definitely felt lackluster that year, and I'm hoping we don't see a repeat of that with Black Ops 6. Now, my faith in this has been renewed a little bit with Sledgehammer this year. They've been doing amazing for 6v6 content for the most part, on average. And I'm hoping that's a general shift within the franchise as a whole and not just a Sledgehammer thing, but I guess we'll find out this time around with Black Ops 6. And this just leaves me with one last section on my list here, which of course I have to include in a video like this. This is, quite simply, the modern style of Call of Duty matchmaking, and I would argue more importantly, the disbanding lobbies. And I'm not going to beat that horse to death too hard in this video. We're not going to dive into all the details since I've talked about this at great length so many times, including recently where I covered the recent white paper they did talking about skill in their matchmaking. But essentially with this, it appears their modern style of SBMM, that's not going anywhere. I don't like it, but that's how it is these days. However, like I said, more importantly, I feel like the disbanding lobbies is the worst part of this system. And I highly suspect we're just going to be seeing the status quo this year with Black Ops 6. I absolutely doubt they're going to be getting rid of disbanding lobbies, and therefore this is a concern of mine as well, is that with these systems in place, regardless of the fact that they're trying to return to that traditional prestige system, which I'm really excited for, I don't think it's really going to feel like a traditional Call of Duty game, like a pre-Modern Warfare 2019 COD game, because of the modern matchmaking and disbanding lobbies. And with that, that wraps it up for the primary concerns that I have at this stage when it comes to Black Ops 6 this year. Like I said at the beginning, I'm definitely excited about this game. I am feeling quite optimistic, but at the same time, I do have these handful of concerns, and I'm just curious to see how they end up playing out. I'm sure for much of this, we're going to figure it out throughout the beta of the game, whereas other points like the post-launch map content, we won't really know until we get into launch, unless the developers state otherwise. And of course, these are all just my thoughts and concerns leading up to Black Ops 6, and I'm really curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Based on what we know so far, what are some of your concerns with Black Ops 6? If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.